Alright, so what we're going to do now is we need to take our rendering here and we need to be able to break it up into pieces. Okay, it makes it a lot easier to edit things later. If I decided that I really want to add a better glow to this, or I wanted to add some fancier colors, I can do that. But I need to be able to separate this item from all the rest of the items so that I can isolate just that smoke trail. Same thing with this. I may not like the color of this smoke, and I may want the smoke to look a little bit different. I may want to add a blur to it, any number of things. So these are already cached out. So if I click on this guy and go to the attribute editor, you can see there's a meteor cache here. And if I click on this guy and go to this, there's a smoke cache. Okay. And what we want to do is find a good frame to work on. So I'm going to go to frame 40 in my case because I can see the smoke from the one. I can see this in the fireball. I may actually jump back a little bit, maybe to like 35 at one point. You can see how slow this is going. You'll also notice that because I have the cache, and I haven't done any cache on these particles here, these are the particles that were attached to the building, that they're just kind of like floating in space. And those are fine, we're just going to hide them anyway. Okay. Alright, so what I need to do is I'm grabbing those particles, I'm just going to make a new layer, call it hidden, and then turn it off. We don't need to see those particles anymore. Okay, now that everything's cached, it all is calculated from the hard drive, so I don't need it to calculate where those particles are going and how fast they're going and all that stuff. Alright, so I do have a light in the scene. Right now my textures are just grays, which is fine for now, but I would add other textures once I get further along. And here's a little preview of what the smoke looks like. And this is taking 4 minutes because I have Final Gather on and some lighting. So, alright, don't have Final Gather on in that. In this render setting, it's supposed to be a different one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower my render settings. So we're rendering through mental ray. I'm going to lower this as 0.1 because I want this to go quick. I've turned off any Final Gather. I've turned off any motion blur. I've turned off any image-based lighting stuff that I have. Okay. So now if I were to just render this as is right now, we'll hit the render button and see that everything's going to be all joined in under one final image. And you can see this is still taking some time. There it goes. Okay, so you can see this is going to take some time, so I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to go up to Options, Test Resolution, and do this at about 50%. Okay, I'm also going to find a little bit different angle here, maybe something like that. That'll be good. And then render this again. Now it should take roughly a quarter of the time. But obviously it's going to be smaller, but we can work with this a lot quicker. Okay, and that's the goal of this, is to be able to work quickly. Alright, so here we go. It took about 32 seconds, which is still a little bit longer than I'd like, but it's good enough. Just to double check, I'm going to grab my light here and just make sure there's nothing else I could turn down. I think I have all my yeah, this is all down to one sample, so yep, I'm as low as I can really get on this. I could lower my quality setting even further, 0.05, 0.025, 0.03, but I'm going to kind of ruin some stuff, so I think 0.1 is probably good. Alright, so if we look at this final image, you'll see that we have this smoke trail here with the little fire. There's also a ball at the center of this. We have our building pieces. We have the smoky cloud. We have a shadow here from the building. And I don't believe our fluid effect is casting a shadow right now. It could be. It's just hard to see at that angle. Okay, but we'll see all that stuff as we go. All right. What we're not getting in this final image, there's not really like a glow happening on this as far as like this lighting up this area. Like if this meteor's coming and it's going to hit this building, there'd be some sort of glow there on that side. Okay, so that's one thing I can look at later on as I get closer to the completion of this. All right, so what we're going to try to do is recreate this scene, but have the ability to break this up into layers. Okay, so I'm just going to save this image so I have reference. I'll just call this the original. I'll just save it as an if. Alright, so now we're going to go over here to the render layers. And on the render layers, I'm going to click on thinking. There we go. I'm going to marquee everything, and I'm just going to make a couple new render layers. So let's say 4 new render layers. It's always best to make extra, and then you can just turn them off by clicking the little green check mark here. Okay, so number 1, this will be called the smoke trail. Okay, now I can't just simply put the smoke trail on its own render layer, because if I'm from this angle, you know, the building and this other smoke would obscure that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the building geometry, if it lets me. There we go. And this is going to be a bit of a slow process, especially, you know, on your laptop if that's what you're working off of, like I am. And I'm just going to go in the outliner and grab also the sphere. There. Yep. Okay. And I'm going to assign, these are all the pieces of geometry that are in the scene. I'm going to assign a Lambert. Okay. And this is just going to be called the black hole. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my colors off, go to my matte opacity and change this to black hole. Now what should happen when I render this out is that this black hole is being treated as, come on, it's being treated as basically a mask. So if I were to render this now, what we would get is we should just get the smoke here and the cloud area. And then it should be masked out, and the mask should be somewhat obvious as to what's happening. Alright, so now if we kind of do a side by side here, you can see that this corner area right here, look close, you can see that this area right here where the building is right there is obscured. As we get further down here, this is also obscured. If I check my alpha, which we're going to be doing a lot of, you can see that I have essentially this and that. Okay. Okay. Now for the 2 different kinds of smoke here, if we look at, you know, where these things are at, this smoke, I'm going to be shooting this, my camera angle is going to be down here. Okay, so this smoke here is always going to be in front of that smoke. So what I can do is just grab this, which is the building smoke. Come on. Right there. And I'm going to right click on my smoke trail and just remove that selected object. Okay, so now that is no longer on this layer. So I just have the smoke from my meteor on that layer. So when I hit render again, actually renders a bit quicker, now I can see just that meteor coming in here. And that way I can just layer you know, this in the back and then the smoke in the front. Okay, so that's cool there. That's that one. So now in this one, our next layer, we need to be able to isolate the objects. Okay, And in this case, I'm not going to try to isolate each individual object. We could do that too. It would just be more render layers. So what I want to do is just isolate each or all the objects on one separate layer. So I'm going to grab my smoke trail here. And down here, I'm going to say received shadows is on, primary visibility is off. Okay, you'll see how this turns orange, and that means that it's not going to render that item. I'm going to grab the other one, primary visibility off. So now if we go and render this, you'll see that we don't have the smoke right here. As we have the building, and right, spin around a little bit. There it is. We'll have the ball, but obviously I need to add a light on that side if I want to see that. Okay. Now I did just turn off primary visibility, but you'll see that there's cast shadows, there's receive shadows, and there's also visible in reflections and visible in refractions. Okay, I'm not going to have any refractions, so I could actually just turn that off. But I'm going to leave on visible in reflections. Okay, if we had the water in the scene and we wanted that to reflect, we'd want to definitely make sure that's on. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is just grab the ground here, and just so we can see it, I'm going to add a Mia. Ground Mia. I'll leave it at the default settings, and then I'll find a good angle here, and then I can render this out. Alright, now if we look close, it's going to be hard to see because of the quality of this. There's a tiny little glow right here coming from this. Okay, so you can see where that's reflection is actually happening right here. Alright, so the reflection part is working. I could make this chrome, and we'd probably be able to see that a bit better. It's still going to be grainy though, so we'll just have to make do with what we have. There we go. So now you can definitely see here's the smoke, here's that, and then here's this other stuff. Now one thing I might want to do is I may want to separate the reflections, so that's on one pass, and the geometries on another pass. Okay, so if I grab my geometry here, and I go to assign favorite, and I say use background. I grab the building, I'll use the outliner, I'll grab all three items here, and I'll just assign that same use background shader. Okay, the use background is a special kind of shader which will actually not render anything except for shadows and reflection. So as it's done thinking, there we go. We get a good angle, we'll hit the render button again, and what we should get is just a layer that has the reflection and some shadows. Now we may have to go to the alpha channel to see that, but you'll see what it looks like. Okay, so in this case you'll see that we have now the smoke trail and this, but this is all reflection. If I switch to my alpha channel, you can see here's all the shadows. So here's a shadow for this, there's a shadow for this, for the little area we have inside here, and here's the area for that. Now again, if I wanted to break this down further, I could actually go into this, and I could say that this ground plane doesn't cast a shadow, and that way I'll eliminate the shadows here. I can also grab this building. Why it's so hard to do in there? Building, and say the building doesn't cast a shadow. So now I'm eliminating the shadows for the building. I'm eliminating the shadows for this. I can even grab the sphere and eliminate shadows for that. That way I'm simply left with the shadows for these two items. For the building itself too, I could even say, you know what, I really don't want the building to receive sorry, don't want, okay. I could say I don't want the building to be visible in reflections or refractions if I needed to, but I think that's good because it's already off. Alright, and this might be a little hard to see. Let me just boost this up a little bit. And we can see this is reflections of the smoke on the building, this is reflections of the smoke on the ground, and this is reflections of that and that. So that should give us a nice pass to play with. I think I would probably like to separate the building from the other stuff, and here's how we do that. Is I just grab the building and I turn off primary visibility. Okay, or I could go to assign existing and assign the black hole to the building. That way when we render this, we shouldn't get any reflection on the building, but we should get the reflection on the ground and should get the shadows in the appropriate areas. And a lot of this, it's a per scene thing, so you just kind of have to figure out what elements you want to break apart and start breaking them apart. So once this is done, there we go. So now we have reflection over here from our building, reflection right here on the ground, and that's cool. That's what we wanted. Okay. So now this one is going to be called reflections and shadows. So let's call this a little shorter name. RFL underscore SHD underscore particles, or fluids, or smoke, or whatever you want to call them. Now again, we could break this apart. These are one, this is another, but I don't want to complicate this too much. Alright, so to summarize so far, we have the smoke trails, which is just this. We have the reflections of these things in the ground. I still need to create one that just has the buildings stuff, so let's go to building smoke. And I'm just going to click on this guy, the smoke trail, right click, remove it, grab my three objects, alright, so we just grab these pieces and we assign that black hole to those. And we just always do these tests, because you have to test out and make sure that everything's working correctly. And then we just have our building smoke right here. Perfect. Hit escape. Always check the alpha. Make sure that we do have transparency. Okay. So now we have the smoke trail, we have the reflections, and then the last bit is just going to be the pieces of geometry. Okay. So on this one, these guys are not going to render. Okay, and then whatever materials I want on these, that's what I would actually assign on this layer. So my sphere, I'm going to assign EMEA. And I'm going to reduce the amount of reflectivity on this. I'm not working in this scene with the linear workflow, so I can just assign regular materials. Something like that. My building, I'll assign something. Oops. kind of plasticky. And my ground I'll assign another one and do another plasticky one, but just give a different color. There we go. I think I'm going to switch this color, just I don't want it to be conflicting with my building color. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to go back to frame, let's say 35 this time. Rename this geometry, and I'm going to just render a single frame. I actually need to go up to frame 40 so I can see all of it. And single frame, if, perfect, perspective, fine, HD 540. Now I'll turn the quality up to 2. And I'm just going to do a batch render. Oops, I have to change this to. I delete this, and then I right click and say insert layer name. Okay, and that will give me the layer names individually when it renders out. So I'm going to save, and then do a batch render, even though it's one file, and it'll render out at frame 40 all 4 of these separately. So then I can take this in a nuke and see what it's going to look like. Now I could also, lower this down to 0.25, render it out, at a low res, try that and see if it works. But I want to get a good preview for the video. I would recommend, as you're testing this stuff out, is to lower this down to make it 0.25 or make it 0.1 or something, so you can test it before you take this extra time. Because you may go into nuke and realize, whoops, I forgot a pass, or I forgot something, and I need to render that out. Okay, so I'll be back in a few minutes when this is done rendering out my frames. Alright, so I finally finished rendering. So I'm going to go into nuke and hit R to read my stuff in. I'm going to go find my footage. Building shadow, yep. Just making sure, images. And here they are. You'll see one's called geometry, building smoke, RFL shade particles, and smoke trail. So I just highlight all those and bring them in. And then hit L after I highlight them all. And if I look at them, you'll see here's what the end results are. Okay, so we're just going to combine these together. So I'm just going to hit M for merge. Drop this together here. So I have this is my A and this is my B. So now if I preview that, you'll see that the smoke is actually behind it. Okay, whenever you look at these merges, the A is the on top one. So I need to switch it. So I'm going to hit this and then hit Shift X. And then you'll see now the smoke is on top. Okay, now, there's no animation to this, it's just a still frame. So if I go over here to the mode, I can actually change the mode too. I could make this a plus, which would actually combine them together, which doesn't give us the desired results. Over, which is currently set to, is taking this and then using the alpha channel to combine that into a matte. Okay, we could also make this something like a multiply if we wanted to, or a minus, or any one of these other ones here. But over works. Alright, so now we have this on top of that, which is good. And then the very bottom thing is going to be this. Okay, so we also have this reflection here that I want to add in. And I'm going to just take this and merge it on top of that. And again, if I make a mistake and I merge it incorrectly, I can always swap it. Okay, so right now we have the smoke. You can see how harsh the smoke reflection is. It's way too much. I could use the Shift X just to see, maybe it'll give me a different result. No different result. I'm going to change this to a plus, And now we're going to get, you'll see, a much nicer reflection, where it actually looks like a reflection. I may need to boost this a bit so you can see it, or not. Okay, it is there. I could also keep this on over, and I could adjust this here, the mix, and that's acceptable also. Okay. I actually like the way the plus looked, just subtle. Alright, and then I can still probably knock it down some. Good. Okay, and then we have the final thing, which is this. So this is going to be on top. We'll merge this onto the back. And then we'll see, here is our final image. It's this. Okay? So now that we have all of these merged together, I'm just going to do a little organization. Okay, so I just tap the spacebar to break this full screen, so it's easier. And A's should always be on the left-hand side. Okay, so A here, B there. A here, B there. Okay, and if you look at this, it makes it easier to read. Here's where we started, and we went all the way down the list. And I could actually, scoot this to the A's here and the B's there. Doesn't matter. All right. Or I could scoot this over like that, make this here. Whatever makes it easier for you to read. I like to just keep it like this, the way it was. Because now what I can do is I can go into my smoke trail, and I could hit G for grade. And then I could adjust things like the smokiness of this. Now if you look, we're actually getting this like cut off by this area, right? So if I hit Shift X just to see, there we go. That actually looks a bit better. It looks like it's actually going through the building, which is what it should be doing. Here, oops. Nope. 10. Shift X. There, it looks like it's behind it. Okay. So that's again another option for playing with this. I do like the way that looks better, so I'm just going to scoot this over here because that's now an A. Pull that down. Good. And once you render it out, you might say, you know what, I like the way this looks here or there, or I may want to reposition some of these. That's no big deal to do because you can just disconnect it and then move this here, move that there, and reconnect it into something else. Okay. I could also go onto this smoke trail. I'll pull this over a little bit more because I'm going to add some more stuff. And I could add a glow. And so now we've just enhanced the glow that's there. This grade is a bit too much, so I'm just going to knock it down. And now we have this glow where we can control the brightness of that glow. Okay, so now that I know that everything here looks good, then I can say, okay, well, I like the way this looks. And I can verify it just by going to my original and looking at this, and you can see I pretty much get the same thing. I get this stuff here with the smoke. I look at that end result, and I get that same result. Okay, so there's that, there's those added together. Maybe I can add some blurriness to this, maybe a little bit too blocky, so I can add some blur. So you can see how I softened that smoke some. I could even add in a background. Hit Tab, add a constant. It's like a solid in After Effects. And I can pick a color. And then I just merge it in. And I connected something wrong here. Let me see. It's like that. It's good there. Good there. Okay. And then again, I'll just use Shift X. So now the background. And now I can see the smoke trail a lot nicer. Maybe I'll just desaturate this a touch. There we go. Okay, and here's the cool thing too, is I can say, you know what, I need more smoke, or I want this to look smokier. So I could actually just take this and duplicate it. So Control C, Control V, and then I could merge it in again. And now you see how I get like double the smoke. And I actually have two effects going on here, is that I have one smoke that's kind of fuzzy, which is this smoke, and the next smoke is adding a little bit more detail to that. Okay, I could even add a little blur to this one, just not as much. Okay, so there's a difference between the two smokes that are there. Alright, so once I'm happy with the way this is looking in my final comp, then I can export stuff out. I could even go to this guy here, add a grade to my geometry, and go into my colors, and I can start shifting some of these colors around. Oops, that's the alpha. Okay. And if we had liquid in here, that would just be another piece of geometry that we would isolate. We could adjust the coloring of that as well. Okay. Typically, if you have a big particle shot or you have lots of dynamic stuff happening, you might have several different layers of things going on. One thing that looks kind of funny is it looks like it's behind the building, but in front of the smoke. So let me see if I can adjust that. So here's our image there. I think I want to move this smoke up. So I'm just going to disconnect it here and move this up the chain. There we go, that looks better. Now it looks like it's actually behind the smoke and behind the building. Okay. So we have the building here, our smoke trail there, then our building smoke, and then the reflections, and then that. Okay, and we could even say, let's see what happens when we put the reflections up top. Okay, no big difference there. Alright, I'll probably keep the reflections and shadows up there, just so everything's kind of on the ground. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to save this as vertical shot, building, all that. Okay, so then I would come back to Maya. I know everything works. I go to my render settings. I would set this up as name.number.extension. Do my range here, so 1 through, in this case it's 120. I'll probably have more. That's it. So I would do my batch render, and then I would just come into Nuke, and all I have to do is just double click each one of these when it's done, click the folder, and then load in the shot. So here I would add the building, I would add the other stuff all the way down the line, all of these individual pieces. And then at the very, very end of this, I would add a write node. And just like we did before, we would click on the folder, hit the back button. I'm going to make a new folder called Nuke Out. And I'll call this building breaking dot pound 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 dot tif. And then I would render this out, bring it in After Effects, make it into a movie. Okay? So that's the process for finishing up this assignment. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff that we could add to this. We could add, individual pieces of debris falling down. We could add a smoke cloud coming up if it hits the ground, whatever. There's the possibilities are limitless. Okay? So that's just going to take some time. It took about 15 minutes. For my first one to go, so it'll probably take about 15 minutes for the next well, per frame, 15 minutes per frame for that one. Now the way it does these render layers is it's going to do smoke trail, all the smoke trail. Then it'll do all the reflection. Then it'll do all the building smoke, then do all the geometry. Okay? So you have to wait until all these are done before it actually gives you something you could work with. Alright? So that's it. Cool.